Hi, my name is Brenton Jenkins. As part of the MSIDT program at Cal State University Fullerton, I'm going to be discussing Mayer's 12 principles of multimedia learning. We'll start with an introduction into multimedia learning and the purpose of these principles. We'll then take a quick look at a couple examples. Finally, we'll take a deeper dive into one of these principles and discuss how studies can bring new light and inform further development on these concepts. The School of Education at the University of Delaware describes multimedia as the use of a computer to present and combine text, graphics, audio, and video with links and tools that let the user navigate, interact, create, and communicate. Richard Mayer, professor of psychology at UC Santa Barbara, is the author of the book Multimedia Learning, where he discusses the 12 principles of multimedia learning. Mayer more simply describes multimedia as a form of computer-aided instruction that uses two types of media at the same time. Studies and test scores have shown that when learners connect more than one type of media, such as words and pictures, they are engaged in meaningful learning, which results in a deeper understanding of the material. So what are these 12 principles used for? They're essentially a checklist to go through whenever you're creating multimedia learning content. They're guidelines to consider when thinking about how to best ensure your learners will understand and retain what you're teaching. Andrew DeBell, a training content consultant, suggests these principles can help with designing learning videos, e-learning courses, and instructor-led PowerPoint presentations. In the book E-Learning and the Science of Instruction, Proven Guidelines for Consumers and Designers of Multimedia Learning, Mayer points out that learners engage in active learning by mentally representing material in words and in pictures, and by mentally making connections between the pictorial and verbal representations. Let's explore this by discussing some examples of the 12 principles. The first of Mayer's 12 principles from the book Multimedia Learning is the coherence principle. It states, people learn better when extraneous words, pictures, and sounds are excluded rather than included. What this is saying is all content, everything seen and heard, competes for the learner's attention. The more elements that compete, the more each one gets diminished. So it's best to keep all non-essential materials out of the instruction. The second of Mayer's 12 principles is the signaling principle. This principle states, people learn better when cues that highlight the organization of the essential material are added. This one is pretty straightforward. If you want to emphasize or call attention to an element, make sure it stands out. Visually highlight, bold, change the color of, or draw an arrow pointing to it. In the study Departing from PowerPoint Default Mode, Applying Mayer's Multimedia Principles for Enhanced Learning of Parasitology, conducted by Jyoti Mahantesh Nagmoti, traditional PowerPoint slides on the subject of parasitology were presented to a group of students. By traditional, Nagmoti means slides contained mostly text with few pictures, and the content was mostly delivered by reading the text with some explanation. Another PowerPoint presentation was presented to a different group of students. This second presentation on the same subject was modified to take into account Mayer's principles. These slides contained less text and more graphics. The text and graphics were placed in close proximity, and they were presented simultaneously rather than successively. All students were then tested after the presentations. Students who experienced the presentations modified with the principles in mind had statistically significant higher scores. Let's take a look at one more example, Mayer's third principle, the redundancy principle. It states, people learn better from graphics and narration than from graphics, narration, and on-screen text. The main idea here is that when there is narration, having the same content in text is redundant. Learners can read text and then look at graphics, or they can listen to audio narration while looking at graphics. The principle is conveying that learners do not benefit from looking at graphics, listening to narration, and trying to read text all at the same time. It's information overload. I'm going to discuss how to make tea as an example. Fill a kettle with water and place it on the stove. Heat the kettle until the water boils. Open a package of tea and place the tea bag in a mug appropriate for hot water. Then pour the boiling water over the tea bag, filling up the mug. Wait until the temperature of the tea is safe and pleasant to drink. Some people remove the tea bag after a few minutes. It's up to you. Enjoy. Notice how distracting it is to listen to the narration, look at the graphics, and try to read the text all at the same time. Having only graphics and narration, or only graphics and text, will help you in not overwhelming your learners. It's important to note that these principles are simply guidelines and should not be taken too rigidly. If your specific instruction doesn't work with one or more of these principles, that's fine. They're only considerations to keep in mind. A study, Revising the Redundancy Principle in Multimedia Learning, conducted at UC Santa Barbara by student Cheryl Johnson and Professor Richard Mayer himself, revealed these principles may even evolve over time. This study found that having text in addition to graphics and audio narration was not always problematic, provided that the text was short, only consisting of 2 or 3 words, the text was placed next to the graphics, and that the graphics were static, not animated. One more important note to take into consideration when referring to the 12 principles is that they may not always apply to all learners in the same way. The 12 principles were developed based on empirical studies of native English-speaking students and may not apply to English as a second language, ESL, students. In the study Optimum Input Mode in the Modality and Redundancy Principles for University ESL Students Multimedia Learning, conducted by Yanan Liu, Bong-Ji Zheng, and Zelene Roy Campbell, it was found that having all 3 components, text, graphics, and audio narration, did not lead to statistically significant differences from using only 2 of these components when it came to knowledge retention. This indicated that the redundancy principle does not always apply to the learning of ESL students. Further research could provide yet additional new insights. If repeating all audio narration in text form is redundant and problematic, but including very few words or short phrases may be helpful, where's the line between too much text and an appropriate amount? As we just discussed, additional studies on Mayer's 12 principles of multimedia learning can shed new light on these principles. There are still 9 more principles we didn't discuss here. To learn more, check out your local library for Richard Mayer's book, Multimedia Principles, or simply type Mayer's 12 Principles of Multimedia Learning into your favorite search engine. I hope you enjoyed this discussion of Mayer's 12 Principles of Multimedia Learning. Have a nice day.